This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Christmas will be here before you know it, and you know what would make a great stocking stuffer for everybody in your family? Sterling Soap. From bar soap to shave soap, beard balm to lip balm, aftershaves and lotions, Sterling Soap has something for everyone on your list. Check out their seasonal soaps that will complement the scents of your home this holiday season. And they're more than just soap. They also have a full line of coffee straight from the Sterling Roastery. Find their full line of products at sterlingsoapcompany.com.
Looking for the perfect gift for that basketball fan in your life? Well, I've got a book for you. It's called Basketball Now. Newly updated for 2025, it spotlights 50 of the NBA's top stars. Think fast breaks, clutch threes, and buzzer beaters. Captured in stunning photography with sharp, readable analysis. From rising stars to veteran icons, this book is a courtside pass to the game right now. Wrap up a slam dunk this holiday season and pick up your copy of Basketball Now today at your favorite bookseller.
This is Basketball History 101 with Rick Loayza.
Welcome back to Award-winning Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network. I am your host, Rick Loayza, and this is the podcast where we bring to life some of the forgotten stories from basketball history. We are bringing old school basketball to a new school audience, and today we bring you the story of one of the most clutch performances in NBA playoff history. I have to take you back to the first round of the 1991 playoffs. Now, back then, the first round of the playoffs was a best-of-5 affair. The league has since changed it to a best-of-7 for a couple of reasons. One, it means more basketball games, which means more revenue. Two, it reduces the chances of an upset. If a top-seeded team has one or two bad games, that could mean losing the first round. Of course, the NBA wants to make sure that the best teams get to continue to move forward through the playoffs. And in this particular case, it was the fifth and final game between the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. The game was played in the Boston Garden in front of a sold-out crowd. Of course, this series was tied 2-2, necessitating the Game 5 to determine who was going to play the defending champion Detroit Pistons in the second round. Of course, tensions were always high in an elimination game. There was no margin for error. Each team was going to have to play their best basketball if they had any hope of advancing to the second round. And then the great players always seem to find something extra in a situation like this. For Larry Bird, the motivation was found in Chuck Person of the Pacers. Person was also known as the Rifleman because he was known for shooting from long distance. Also, his full name is Chuck Connors Person. And Chuck Connors, the guy he was named after, was the actor and former Celtic who famously portrayed the Rifleman in the 1950s TV show. Now, at this point in the league's history, the three-pointer had only been in use for around a decade, and teams had not really figured out how to truly make it a weapon like in today's NBA. Now, Chuck Person was one of the league's leaders in three-point shooting. He was only in his fifth season in the NBA, and he wanted to show the good people of Boston what real shooting looked like. At least that was his intention. And that was all the motivation that Bird needed to put on a show for the crowd and the national television audience. These were the moments that Bird lived for. Now, if you happen to be a member of the media on that day, you could tell that something special was about to happen. Larry Bird was always cordial with the media and gave interviews as necessary, but he was never looking to be interviewed. But on this day, he was particularly animated before the game and was unusually friendly with the media. That meant that he was extra excited for this game. Now, the game itself started out like a typical playoff game. Certainly, there was intensity from both teams as one of them was about to play their last game of the season. The Celtics took a 10-point lead at the end of the first quarter, and then the Pacers found something in the second quarter and started to close the gap. Celtics coach Chris Ford sent in Derek Smith to put in a couple of hard fouls on Reggie Miller, and that he did. He practically took Miller's head off in one sequence. The Celtics wanted to play that psychological game with the opponent that had served them well throughout the 1980s when they were going to the finals almost every single year. But the Pacers kept their cool and did not let the hard fouls get under their skin. As the second quarter was coming to a close, there was a series of actions that unfolded to set up a playoff performance for the ages. With around 4 minutes left in the first first half, Mike Sanders from the Pacers was defending Larry Bird and was able to poke the ball away from Bird. Now, most superstars would have just let the steal go and would get ready for the next play. But Bird was a superstar who was willing to do the dirty work. He would go in and fight for rebounds. He would dive for loose balls. He never minded getting physical with an opponent to get that psychological edge. If you ever watched Larry Bird play, then you know that the only thing that ever mattered to him on a basketball court was getting the win, and he would do whatever it took. So when Sanders poked the ball away from Bird, his instinct was to turn and dive for the loose ball before any of the Pacers recovered it. As he dove for the ball, he was completely stretched out and landed right on his chest, and then his face slammed into the famous parquet floor of the Boston Garden. He did not recover the ball. The Pacers recovered it and took off on the other end of the floor for a score. Meanwhile, Larry Bird just laid flat on the floor with his head down. There was no way to miss it. There were 9 players at one end of the court, and at the other was Larry Bird, who appeared to be unconscious. His wife Dinah was in the stands, and she knew immediately that something was very wrong. After a bit of time, Larry Bird slowly got up from the court and took his time walking to the Celtics bench. Head coach Chris Ford did not even let Bird sit down. He directed Bird straight to the locker room with the team's trainer. Without Bird on the floor, the first half ended with a tied score of 58-58. Without Larry Bird in the second half, the Celtics stood no chance against the Pacers. Larry Bird had taken a bad spill and slammed his face on the court and appeared to be badly injured. At halftime, the Celtics were talking about what adjustments they would need to make in the second half. It was intense as neither team was ready to have their season end. Meanwhile, Bird was in the training room with the trainer and the team doctor. The hope was that the 20 minutes or so that constituted an NBA playoff halftime would be enough to evaluate Bird, get him some painkillers and ice to reduce the swelling that was happening to his face. At the end of halftime, the Celtics went back out onto the court without their leader. Nobody knew what was going on with Bird. The media had reporters and cameras stationed outside the Celtics locker room hoping to get any information on what was happening to Larry Bird. The loyal Boston fans were all keeping one eye on the court and one eye on the tunnel that led to the locker room. They were hoping and praying that Bird would emerge from that tunnel ready to save the day for the Celtics. And the Celtics fans got their wish. About 5 minutes into the third quarter, Bird suddenly emerged from the locker room. The television cameras caught it all in real time. Now, as I mentioned, the cameras were stationed outside the Celtics locker room, and they followed Bird as he jogged from the locker room down the hallway, up a few steps, and out onto the arena floor. It actually was a really great piece of sports television. All at once, a huge ovation went up as everyone realized that Bird was back. At the time that Bird emerged from the tunnel, the game was at a timeout. Bird jogged over to the Celtics bench and let Chris Ford know that he was ready to go back in. As he started to make his way down to the bench, the coach grabbed him and let him know that he was going in immediately. Do not even bother having a seat on the bench. So Bird took off his warm-up jacket and stepped right onto the court. As the camera got a close-up of Bird's face, it was obvious that his face had taken quite an impact. There was bruised swelling underneath his right eye. And over the next 11 minutes of game action, Bird played as well as anyone has ever played the game of basketball. He had found that zone that made the great ones all but unstoppable. He hit a fadeaway jumper for the and one. He banked one off the glass from the right side. He hit Reggie Lewis with a pass for an easy dunk. He drove the basket for a reverse layup. The whole time he was not smiling or laughing or high-fiving anyone. The look on his face was deadly serious as he pumped his fist after nearly every made basket. He played that stretch with an anger that is rarely seen. Bird helped the Celtics get up by 14 points around the middle of the fourth quarter, and the coach felt that it was okay to give Bird a rest on the bench so that he could come back in for a strong finish to the game. However, the lead shrunk to 9 with Bird on the bench. He was subbed back into the game, but the Pacers had found something strategically that allowed them to continue to close the lead, even with Bird on the court. With less than a minute left, the score was 120-118 in the Celtics' favor. Brian Shaw of the Celtics was fouled and made both free throws. The Celtics were now up by 4 points. Then, the previously mentioned Chuck Person of the Pacers came down and hit a clutch three-pointer, and that made it a 1-point game with only a second and a half left on the clock. Brian Shaw was fouled again and made both free throws again. It was back up to a 3-point lead with under a second left to play, and that was how it ended. The Celtics survived barely and moved on to play the Pistons in the second round. And Bird finished with 32 points on the night to lead the Celtics despite being out for 15 minutes of the game due to his injury and normal rest. He had a huge bruise on his face. His back issues were getting worse every year. It was obvious that Bird could not move the way that he used to. He was not the same as he was before his back injury a few years earlier. He was not the same player that came into the league in 1979. And what nobody knew at the time was that Larry Bird only had 1 year left in his career. His back injuries would become increasingly painful and disruptive to his ability to play. But on that day, in May of 1991, it was like the old Larry Bird again. He was magnificent. He proved that a team with Larry Bird on the court always had a chance to win the game. And as I said at the top of the episode, this was a performance for the ages. He was able to find the fountain of youth for one last great performance. Well, that is it for today's story. Join us next time when we share another story from basketball history. That's next time on Basketball History 101, part of the Sports History Network, the headquarters of Sports Yesteryear. Go to sportshistorynetwork.com to find out more about this and other sports history podcasts. If you like what you hear, please hit that subscribe button wherever you get your podcast. And check out our page on Facebook. It's called Basketball History 101 Podcast. There you will find short historical posts, and I'll also announce there when new episodes come out. I want to thank my producer and editor, Jacob Loayza. Join us each week as we continue to mine the history of basketball for more great stories from the past. Take care and see you soon.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.